I'm Joel, and this is CryptoTech.Solutions. Hey everybody, welcome back to another installment of CryptoTech.Solutions. It has been way too long since I've put out an episode. Sorry about that, but I've spent the summer moving my family halfway across the country. Literally. Needless to say, moving sucks, but we are extremely happy in our new location. So, if you're in the Washington, D.C. area and you're interested in digital privacy, encryption, Bitcoin, and the like, look me up. You can reach me by emailing joel@CryptoTech.Solutions or message me on Twitter at CryptoTech.Solution. That's at CYPTECSOLUTION. And really, feel free to message me even if you don't live near DC. But it would be cool to network with some peeps here in town. It seems odd for someone who hosts a show about privacy to talk about his personal life on the air. But hey, we're all friends here, right? Okay, so I'm still settling in my new place, and I don't have a proper studio for recording yet, so you'll have to forgive the audio quality. What can I say? I just couldn't stay away any longer. I'm finally releasing a new episode. Plus, I kind of owe it to my last guest to finally publish this interview. Today's guest is Maggie McNeill, author, activist, and sex worker. I interviewed Maggie all the way back on April 14th about sex worker privacy. Unfortunately, we ran into a slew of technical difficulties. The video chat program that I typically use to record episodes wouldn't work on Maggie's computer. So, we switched to a different video chat program. But I really wasn't set up to properly record on that one. And bottom line, the video was unusable. I just want to apologize to Maggie. She took the time and effort to appear in the video. She was incredibly gracious during all of the technical difficulties. It's taken me months to edit the show when it should have taken days. And now I'm not even using the video. Sorry, Maggie. That being said, I was able to salvage most of the audio after running it through some post-production analysis software. Now, I've had to edit out some of the worst bits, but thankfully, those were mostly during moments of casual conversation and not during Maggie's actual answers. There is a section where Maggie is discussing how payment processors, like Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, and even Coinbase, sometimes freeze sex workers' accounts, preventing those workers from withdrawing their funds, sometimes based only on algorithms that monitor patterns of behavior and not even on actual evidence of sex work. Not that that should matter. I left this section of conversation in the interview, even though the audio does cut in and out quite a bit. Even with that, I still feel that you'll be able to completely follow the conversation, and it was just too important to cut out. The final edit of the interview is 35 minutes long, and I think you'll find it extremely interesting. Maggie covers a lot of ground in that short time and points out quite a few things about privacy in the sex industry that are not intuitively obvious. Like the fact that, at this moment in US history, customers are in more danger from law enforcement than sex workers themselves because the current fad is to paint all escorts as trafficking victims, even though they are full-grown, independent adults, and to see customers as exploiters. During the interview, Maggie raised several challenges that sex workers and their customers face regarding digital and financial privacy. But she was also extremely skeptical that encryption tools or Bitcoin could actually help alleviate any of those problems. In her opinion, all of the tools available are workarounds that are either too technically complicated or inconvenient to be effective. And to a certain degree, I agree with her. These solutions are tools to work around the system because the system unjustly limits people's freedom and choices. That means maintaining your digital privacy does take additional effort, and it requires using a patchwork set of tools that are foreign to most people. But this doesn't mean these tools can't be effective or even easy to use once you get to know them. So my plan, not today but soon, is to take each of the issues that Maggie raises and do a show about a tool that addresses each of those specific concerns. For example, in the interview, Maggie says that most professional escorts have their own website, but she also says that she can't imagine anything she would actually want to buy with Bitcoin. Except for pot, that is. Well, if you run a website, your web hosting provider knows your real name and address because you have to provide it to them when you pay for your site with a credit card. Almost all of them, certainly the big name hosting services, make money on that information by selling it to data mining companies, and it usually ends up being public record. Of course, they will offer you the chance to pay a little extra to keep it private, but even then, there are often ways of finding out who owns a website. That's bad news for an escort who wants to keep his or her identity from friends and family and potential stalkers. But, you guessed it, there are hosting services out there that are dedicated to privacy and don't require any of your personal information because they accept payment in Bitcoin. And that's just one of many examples, and I'm really looking forward to making shows from the perspective of a real-world threat model. But of course, these tools can apply to anyone seeking to maintain their online privacy, not just sex workers. That being said, if you are a sex worker and you're proficient with digital privacy tools, or you're really into cryptos like Bitcoin, Monero, or Dash, then please contact me. I would really love to interview you and get your perspective on how these tools have, hopefully, made your work safer and improved your business. Alright, one more bit of housekeeping before we finally start the interview. It seems as if I'm not the only person in the world who had the idea that crypto could help improve the sex industry. Because about 3 weeks ago, a website named Eros.Vision announced that they were going to build the perfect tool for the sex work industry. A completely decentralized marketplace built on top of the ZeroNet and Ethereum technologies. The website bills this platform as the Open Bazaar of sex. If you're not familiar with Open Bazaar, it's a completely free, open source, person-to-person marketplace where you can buy or sell anything using Bitcoin or any other digital money that is supported with the Shapeshift currency exchange. If you've never used Open Bazaar, it's like eBay or Amazon, but without eBay or Amazon sitting in the middle and taking a cut of every transaction. Your computer talks directly to the other person's computer, and you buy the good or service directly from that other person. Open Bazaar has been around for over a year now. The second version of the software is supposed to be released soon, and though it hasn't exactly set the world on fire with adoption, it is a truly remarkable tool with a truly remarkable ambition to set world commerce free. If you've never used it before, you really have to try it. So what's the problem? Well, there's no problem with Open Bazaar, but I'm highly skeptical of this Eros.Vision thing, and here's why. Eros.Vision is cashing in on the latest craze in the crypto world, ICOs, or initial coin offerings. It's where a project develops a brand new type of digital money that works on their specific platform, and then they sell the token for that project to the public in order to crowdfund the development of the work. Now, sometimes there are legitimate reasons to do that, like when the token is completely integral to how the platform will work in the future, or when you don't want your project to be completely hostage to another coin's protocol that you can't control. Now, some examples of legitimate uses are the MadeSafe and the storage projects. But there have been many examples lately of people using the ICO hype to raise millions of dollars in a matter of hours, sometimes minutes, and then disappearing with the money, leaving investors with nothing. I can't say with 100% certainty that Eros.Vision is a scam, but there are some disturbing signs. First, like I mentioned earlier, the website claims that they are trying to build the Open Bazaar of sex. But we already have Open Bazaar. You can sell anything on Open Bazaar, and in fact, there have been escort agency listings in the past. It's not likely that you'll find one there right now, but I suspect that's just because there isn't a very large user base yet. But the platform is there, and it works. Why build a new one, except so that you can be the one who controls it and get rich off of it? Second, I reached out to Brian Hoffman, the lead developer for OpenBazaar, on Twitter. He pointed out that Eros.Vision's website claims that their platform will have fees to post listings for services. And in Hoffman's words, it's not the OpenBazaar of sex if it's not free for everyone to use. And I wonder, how will it be a peer-to-peer decentralized network if it requires fees to post a listing? Who is the central authority that will be collecting those fees? Third, and this is related to the last one, their website says that people who buy their tokens will get early contributor pricing, i.e. 25% off bookings with escorts. Now, how in the world are they going to set a price on what someone else is going to charge for their service if this is a free and decentralized market? Fourth, and this may seem silly to those who are not familiar with the crypto space, but the project does not have a white paper explaining how their platform or their token will work. Now, everyone in the crypto space has a white paper, to the point where having a white paper is almost a joke now. But for something claiming to be a serious project not to have anything but a slick-looking website behind it is extremely disconcerting. When observers have pointed this out, the Eros.Vision Twitter account has replied that they do have a white paper on the website, but in fact, it is just a link to an MIT white paper on developing a decentralized marketplace with a built-in reputation mechanism. Now, of course, that idea would be incredibly useful to a project like Eros.Vision, but that should have been a reference or a footnote in their own explanation of how their project was going to turn that theory into a reality. Placing a link to it on the Eros.Vision website seems like a sloppy attempt to appropriate someone else's work to make the project seem like it has a white paper of its own, when it does not. Fifth, there's no reason why the project would need a new token. An e-commerce platform could use any cryptocurrency as a medium of exchange. And like I said earlier, OpenBazaar uses nearly all of them through its integration with the Shapeshift exchange. 6. Eros.Vision's goal was to raise $5 million in about a week. Now that is a ridiculous sum of money for a software project of this scope, especially for only having a 2-person team as the website claims. To put it in context, OpenBazaar has raised only $4.2 million, and that was over the course of almost 2 years. They raised that money from experienced venture capitalist investors, and only after they had a working prototype produced at a public hackathon, which they could show people. And with that $4.2 million, they're able to support about a 10-person team. As far as anyone knows, the Eros.Vision people haven't produced a single line of code yet, and they certainly wouldn't need $5 million to produce the project they want. Now, 7th, after the Eros.Vision people hit their $5 million goal, they increased the goal to $10 million and extended the coin sale to the end of the month. Because, hey, why not if people are giving you free money? To date, they have raised $7.6 million, and they're still going. And in the second round of coin offerings, they doubled the price of the coins so that they could keep 500,000 of the 10 million total tokens for themselves, so they can keep selling these tokens even after the ICO is over. Now, I'm not saying 100% that this is a scam. In fact, I hope that my instincts are wrong, and that Eros.Vision will be the project to set the sex industry free from government tyranny, but it doesn't look good. Even if these guys are 100% honest and intend to make the platform as they have laid out, raising that much money that quickly can in and of itself derail even the best of teams. And even if they do build the platform that they claim to want, it seems purposefully designed to make the founders rich off the people using it. So if it's not a scam, it seems exploitive and redundant at best. please be careful before handing your money over to anyone. And go check out Open Bazaar, because it's pretty awesome. Now, on to the show. Good afternoon, Maggie. Thank you for joining the show. As you may or may not know, my blog is about digital privacy and about trying to teach people who are not from a technical background. I'm not from a technical background. Trying to teach people who are not from a technical background how to use digital privacy tools to improve their lives. And one of the areas that cryptocurrency and digital privacy have been so effective in helping protect people against the drug war. And seeing that space and seeing what it's done there, I kind of started to think, what are some other areas, because I'm very much aligned philosophically with libertarianism and agorism and voluntarism. How can we use this technology to get around other areas where the state is encroaching on people's behavior, things that consenting adults ought to be able to do? And Absolutely. I thought about the sex industry, and I saw that you're an active voice in that area, and I thought, let me reach out to Maggie and see what she has to say. What's the current state of privacy, among sex workers? What are some common practices now? And are there any opportunities where we can use some of these technologies to make their lives safer? So with that, let me kick things over to you. What's kind of the current state of privacy? I know you're a public figure, but what about most sex workers? How do they handle privacy in their lives?
No, most sex workers are definitely not. I'm very out. Most sex workers not only, but even I don't use my legal name, right? Most sex workers have separated it, and I used to, right? Up until fairly recently, I used to separate my two lives very, very sharply. Use one name, one phone number, one address, one everything for your public persona and one for your private persona, and ne'er the twain shall meet. And even I, as public as I am, like I said, I still don't reveal my legal name. I don't reveal my address. Everybody knows I'm in Seattle, but Seattle's a big city. And I have a separate mailing address. I have a separate email address. A bunch of things that are designed to keep those separate, even though Maggie is a very public figure. And we have to do it that way, right? Because of stigma.
So when you would talk about two separate cell phone numbers, let's just go down the cell phone route, for example. Is that using one phone with voice over IP or another app, or is it using a burner for most people? Or do most sex workers even use separate phones?
Most sex workers use a separate phone, an actual separate physical phone, a burner. I am way too easily aggravated to do that. I can't carry around two phones. So I use a Google Voice number. And so when I call out, the little Google Voice app asks you whether you're calling out on your, Google Voice or not. When people text me, if they're texting to the Google Voice number, it comes in a separate, and it's a completely separate thing. And so, of course, if I needed to, for whatever reason, I could dump that phone number and start with a new Google Voice number if I needed.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing is that most sex workers, they try to separate their lives by having two identities, and that's a pretty common tactic in the privacy world. What would you say is the primary, threat model? Is it from some of their customers finding about their private life, or is it more about law enforcement?
It's about cops. It's about the state. Any danger. Yeah, of course there are like creepy clients, stalkery sort of guys, right? Those you kind of in a sense have to use different tactics, because most of the time, if a guy becomes a stalker, he's already seen you. So he knows where your in-call is. He already knows what your phone number is. He knows what your email address is. You know what I'm saying? It's not the same thing. Whereas there are some guys that get obsessed and try to find out your home information and things like that. That does happen. But it's not nearly as common as the authorities trying to figure out your information. Because, I have no illusions. I'm fairly sure that the FBI knows what my legal name is and all that stuff. Because I'm a loudmouth, and so they pay attention, and you can try as much as you like. So I kind of think that they just don't pick on me because I'm not a big enough fish. Is kind of my thoughts. Fairly sure they knew who I am.
I imagine you're probably right. Cops have used more and more advanced technological techniques, like using stingray devices, which I'm not sure how familiar you are, but for our audience, they're a simulated cell phone tower where they can trick your device into talking to them instead of talking to Verizon or AT&T.
Right.
Are they using similar techniques against sex workers, or is it still, I guess, far enough down where they're just using traditional policing techniques like stings?
They're using things like stingrays against us. They're definitely using I have a sub twice weekly news column, and I have subheadings for different categories. And one of the categories I call guinea pigs, because the reason for that title, that subtitle, is that I've discovered that very, very often when the authorities want to expand the violations of civil liberties, they very often will start with sex workers. We're one of those groups that gets picked on first. So that subheading guinea pigs covers news items that I see in which the authorities are rolling out against sex workers. And of course, my message in my blog is, this is going to be you next. But you need to pay attention to this, right? Because they start with that sex trafficking and all this crap. And so they'll roll out these surveillance models saying, oh, well, we're using this new software that's designed to find sex traffickers and rescue victims and crap like that. Well, what they really mean is that they are spying on sex workers and trying to arrest us. And so it's a lot of these, like Palantir. I'm sure you're familiar with them. Palantir software, data mining software, where they'll try to go through our communications and find as much about us as they can. They'll go through our ads. They're using technologies now to do image recognition, all that sort of thing, which of course, from out sex work with my picture all over the place. That was it was a choice for me, because I knew that these things existed when I made the decision to come out. I wasn't a babe in the woods. I knew very well that image recognition allow them to link up my face and a driver's license or whatever, if they want to go that far.
Do you think it's easier to be a sex worker today, given all the conveniences of the internet and digital technologies, or has it made it worse because it's also made it easier for law enforcement, or what's the balance there?
It goes back and forth. I would say it is easier today in the sense that it is much easier to advertise than it used to be. It is much easier to market to a niche market than it used to be. The internet makes it possible where if you're willing to travel, even if you have a fairly niche type of persona, something that doesn't appeal to the average customer, some kind of guys, if you're willing to travel, you can find those guys all over the country. Whereas when I first started in the business 17 years ago, the internet existed, of course, right? I had an Amazon account and all that back then, but it wasn't, the amount of internet advertising of sex workers was much smaller. Back then, a lot of girls still worked through agencies and that sort of thing. So, like I said, it's made it easier, right? Because you can eliminate that middleman. You don't have to have an agency, right? When I owned my agency, I had to pay big bucks every year for a phone book ad in the Yellow Pages. And now a girl doesn't have to do that. Now she can set up her website. There's places you can put your ad and link to your website for either free or very cheap. And that, of course, was one of the reasons Backpage was so popular, is it was very cheap. It was low entry, right? You could get in Backpage for $5.
For those who are watching who don't know, Backpage recently closed. I'm not sure what they called it, if they called it adult advertising section.
Adult services, I think.
Yeah, adult services section, because of pressure from the government. Has that dampened the use of Backpage that you can see from your vantage point and other sex workers that you know?
It's moved. Craigslist, of course, was the first one to pioneer the format, if you will, of sex work advertising. It was lots and lots and lots of ads in one place. And Craigslist, originally, girls advertised on induction and stuff like that. Then under pressure, Craigslist established an adult services section. Then under more pressure, they started requiring payment for that section so that they could track, make sure people were over 18 and that they had a credit card number attached to that. And then, of course, that wasn't good enough, because then the authorities turned around and claimed Craigslist was making lots of money. And yeah, of course they were making the money. They were making the money because you insisted they take a credit card. And then Craigslist eventually folded entirely and just said, screw it, we're not fooling with this anymore. Meantime, it had come up. in the same sort of thing. So Backpage has always had the adult services section, but it also has the dating sections. And so what happened was, both on Craigslist and on Backpage, when the websites bowed to pressure, all sex workers advertising on those sites did is move to a different section. So now if you go to Women Seeking Men on Page or Craigslist, there's all kinds of escort ads there. Dental services, masseuses, that sort of thing. And this is no different from the way it's always been. It always kind of amuses me when cops think that by declaring something a certain way, that they can make it stop. I mean, it's really rather absurd that they can still believe this in this day and age, that they still think that they can just make a declaration and people will stop doing what they're doing.
I want to come back to Backpages in a minute, because when we were talking through email, we were talking about payment processors and banks and PayPals and other people shutting sex workers down. So I definitely want to get to that. But before we move on, what I heard you saying earlier was that, you used to kind of just get by working with an agency. Maybe that actually made life easier. But in today's market, every worker pretty much needs their own website. They need to reach their own customers on a more peer-to-peer kind of basis.
Yeah, I'd say that's more necessary than it used to be.
But that also seems like that leaves more of a digital trail, probably more evidence of your own history, what you've been doing, who you've been communicating with, what you've been posting up online. How often is that evidence used in criminal proceedings?
I would say not super often from the escort side.
Okay.
But they've, although there are some cases, there was a case in, I want to say last year, where they actually went to a woman's house and arrested her for putting up ads on Backpage. That was their entire evidence. My guess offhand is that that case fell apart, or that she pleaded out, because there's no case there. There's absolutely no way on earth that you can prosecute a person just for putting an ad. Not in the United States anyway, but they try, right? But on the client side, they've been using reviews. That now the norm is for like an escort board, right? That's dedicated to that sort of thing. And they'll write reviews, kind of like Yelp.
Okay.
So it's like, oh, I saw Maggie, and she was just like I imagined she would be, and she was on time, and blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. And so that helps other guys to know, oh yeah, she's a good quantity, worth spending my money. And so the cops are using these reviews as evidence against them for prostitution case. But they're not doing the girls that much, because it's more the guys that they're trying to prosecute with that.
Okay, so if we're looking at this from how do we improve these people's lives, one area to start looking at would be how do we educate customers on how to disconnect themselves from their digital identity. Okay.
Yeah, very much more so than the escorts right now, because even though the cops do go after both of us, right now the dominant paradigm in law enforcement right now is the pretense that sex workers are all victims, that we're stupid, we're spineless, women can't possibly have sex for pragmatic reasons, right? Because we can only imagine sex to be for love or to have babies or things like that. And so if we're having sex for a pragmatic reason, there must be some man making us do that.
I've heard you talk about this before, and how it's actually a very kind of anti-feminist position, because you can't have consent. You
right.
Don't have any agency.
That's right. I have no ability to consent, according to these people. And the men who pay us are evil. And supposedly, basically, we have so little, if a man waves money at us, we have no ability to say no. It's just like a magic wand, that just waving the money makes us consent. And this is the dominant paradigm right now. And so they're going after the guys. Now, this doesn't really stop them from going after the girls. They still go after the girls, and they just accuse them of pimping or things like that, right? But in the public face, they're more going after the guys. And so they're using more resources. They're more heavily digging to get the guys right now. So I think that's more of a, in a way right now, I think it's more imperative that the men disconnect their identities than us. Because when you think about it, we can disconnect our identities to a degree, but if you're going to show your face, again, image recognition software, right? If you're going to have a website, you're paying somebody to host that website, and they could potentially subpoena that person. You've got a phone number that can be traced. You've got people that come to your in-call. So, there's a lot of holes in an escort's armor, so to speak, that if the cops really badly enough, they could use them. Whereas for a client, their only point of contact is that digital channel. If he can cover that, then unless he falls into a sting, he's pretty much bulletproof. Whereas us, there's plenty of other ways they can go. They're just not doing it right now because the paradigm says that we're victims and not malefactors.
So in the privacy community, it's kind of across the board. It doesn't matter what your background is or what your occupation is. We're trying to encourage people to use encrypted communication, texting apps like Signal, email encryption like Proton Mail, so that companies, like Google, Verizon, things like this, they can't scrape it to gather a profile on you. And so that government agencies like the NSA don't have a large pool of data that they can then gather on everyone. They would have to do a more targeted approach. So that's kind of what I would want in general for everyone. But for sex workers specifically, given the conversation that we've just had, would encrypted messaging provide any really additional security to them at this point? Or where do you see roles for a Signal and encrypted email and things like that?
For my own self, I have a little bit more of a fatalistic viewpoint. I'm kind of like, there's almost nothing I can really want to go after because I am so out. With other girls, I think there's certainly a role for those things. They don't, and this is going to sound, again, a little bit fatalistic, but you have to understand how the majority of enforcement workers or clients, of course, we had a heal just last year, which was they took down one of the review board and they really heavily went after these clients. But for the most part, across the country in the United States, most of the enforcement is sting-based. They put fake ads to try to get clients in, and they pose as clients to get escorts in, and they arrest them. So it's very sting-based, it's very simple, it's very much see what sticks, and it's very much low-hanging fruit. Because they still do the street stings. They still have the policewoman dress up in the Hollywood outfit and arrest any guy who stops. They'll put fake back page ads up. And again, they just set themselves up in a hotel room. Any guy that walks in the door, they arrest him. And so they do use these data mining tools and such. But for the most part, the majority of their impulse to throw bodies into a cage can be satisfied with a lower tech approach. The one time I ever got arrested, right, which was in 2005 in New Orleans, when they finally got around to giving me a phone call, which took 3 hours, I called my husband, he called my lawyer called a federal judge, the federal judge called the jail, said let her out, and I was out in 15 minutes. And the cops aren't stupid, right? They know that. They know that the so-called high-end escorts, the girls that have a lot of setup, that have a website, that they're going to have lawyers, that they're going to have stuff like that. They would much rather go after the street girls that don't have so much of an established presence because they know they can slam them. They can just shove them in jail, force them to take a plea and be done. It's the same as the drug war. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. On the drug war, the approach has been from the private side, the non-government side, the folks that just want to live their lives and not be messed with. The goal has been total anonymity. Use things like Tor, like encrypted messaging, never have your real identity connected. And that's something that's just not an option for sex workers like you.
It's not, because we have to have our faces out there, right? If a guy can't see the pretty face, he's not interested.
So for security reasons, then I guess vetting of these customers, and on the customer side, vetting of the sex worker, that's got to be huge. So what tools are at your disposal for that? And are there any rooms for growth and improvement in that area?
I think there certainly is, and there are people working on that. Two-way reviewing, for example, letting the girls review the guys as opposed to just the guys reviewing the girls. Okay, that this person with this online handle was a good client. Right now, we do it by way of references mostly. So 10 times a week, I get emails or texts from girls in other parts of the country or here in Seattle that say, hey, this gentleman with this email address and this phone number says he saw you. Do you remember him? I'll look at I remember, I saw him such and such a time and he was fine, or, well, he gave me this little bit of a problem or whatever. It's extremely rare that I have real issues with. If that does happen, of course, you tell them about it. Oh, that guy, that sort of thing. That's how we vet it from the sex worker side. From the client side, it's vetted mostly by way of reviews and such.
Those boards
The boards, right.
that can then be used as evidence later. Yeah. It's a
Right.
catch-22.
Right. But what I've been seeing lately, and what I've been kind of encouraging guys to do for a few years now, is from the guy side, from the client side, is to look at social media. Girls have a very established presence on social media. And so, like me, right? And a lot of others. We've got a website that's been there for years. We've got profiles on boards that have been there for years. We've got a Twitter account. We've got, some girls have Facebook, whatever. If a girl has that kind of a footprint that's been there for a long time, I mean, I've been on Twitter since 2011. I've had my website, my current website, since 2014. I've had my current profile on. I've got a footprint on the internet going back in one way or another for 17 years. So if a guy, is skittish and nervous and he's never done this before, and he goes on the internet and looks around and he sees Maggie McNeill, he can see a big long footprint, a big long trail going back a long way. He knows I'm not a cop. Now, of course, he's got no references to give me. So then I have to use various means of determining whether I am going to trust him or not. I can call he can give me his work number. I can call him work. Guys will give me their LinkedIn profiles. They'll give me, stuff like that. If they're a professional, and many of them are, let's say they're attached to a university, right? They're a college professor, or if they're a doctor, they're attached to a hospital. They can give me the hospital's website address. I can look at their name, and they're on the hospital's website, all those sorts of things. So I can vet them in ways other than by references if they don't have any references. But they've got to be willing to trust me with that stuff, right? They've got to be willing to give me that information. And so that's where the kind of dance starts. Because if he doesn't know the girl, if she doesn't have much of an online reputation, he might be very reluctant to give her that info.
Absolutely.
And so it becomes this big dance of who's going to trust who first.
So how can we build systems that won't require this kind of trust? And it's going to take somebody who's a lot smarter than me to work on the client and customer verification identity. But let's move on to payment processing, because you talked to me in the email about banks, credit card processors and things like this, PayPal, shutting down sex workers when they find out that you're doing some type of sex work. So how do sex workers, if they're on the internet and they're finding customers and they're finding niche markets on the internet, how do they go about doing these transactions with their clients?
Well, the majority of clients, the majority of transactions are still good old cash. The guy shows up, he puts the cash in your hand. And I have to say, as a horse, there is something extremely cash put in your hand. There's something very satisfying about the Franklins, or the Jacksons, sometimes. But it's, at the same time, it would be really nice and convenient, wouldn't it, if we could take payment in advance from when he came, and you would know he was good, right, before he even showed up.
Yeah.
That would be kind of nice. Some girls would never do it, but it would be nice. Back in the old days, when I had my escort service, we had we took credit cards. I can't take credit cards now, but because of things like PayPal and Square and things like that will shut you down in a heartbeat. I have a PayPal account, but I only use it for donations to my blog. I use it to sell my books. I use it for things like that are not sex work, because that's okay. PayPal has no problem with that. I can talk about anything I want. But if I actually started saying to guys, oh, you can give me a fee by PayPal or deposit by PayPal, PayPal would shut me down in a heartbeat. So I make sure I do not do that. And any of the processors are like that, right? There's a strong strain of moralism running through all these payment processors. And in addition to that, like Operation Choke Point. I mean, you know about that, right? Your viewers may not know, is last year, or was it 2 years ago? This is 2 years ago. Tom Dart, the sheriff of Chicago, actually wrote a threat letter to Visa and MasterCard, basically saying something like, you got a nice little credit card company here. It'd be a shame if something were to happen to it. And he scared Visa and MasterCard worldwide. A little tin pot sheriff in one American city was able to scare multinational corporations because they don't want even a hint of impropriety. And so when someone shows up, basically in their front lobby, so to speak, electronically speaking, acting like a hoodlum, they want to get rid of that. They want that to go away. And they felt that the amount of money they were getting by processing Backpage's transactions wasn't enough to them to justify dealing with that. And so worldwide, even it's legal, Visa and MasterCard stopped taking payments to Backpage. And that was the beginning of the end that led to eventually, a couple of months ago, Backpage shutting down that section because they just, they could only hang on so long, right? And they take payments in Bitcoin and things. And it is getting easier. I have started seeing things like, well, here in Seattle, Uncle Ike's, the biggest marijuana retailer, right? Marijuana retailers can't take credit cards because the credit card companies won't deal with them because of federal laws. The thing where you can run your credit card, buy Bitcoin, and pay for your purchase in Bitcoin. So it's a two-step process. But Uncle Ike's is a big, huge company. They make like $1 million in sales a week. I can't do that. There's no way I can set up an account to process Bitcoin 2 ways that's going to work for me. And that's one of the reasons that even though a lot of Bitcoin people are like, oh, sex workers need to start taking Bitcoin. The problem is there's not enough you can buy with Bitcoin yet. You can't pay your coin, right? You can't pay your kid's daycare with Bitcoin. You can't put gas in your car with Bitcoin. You can't buy groceries with Bitcoin. And until you can start doing those things with Bitcoin, sex workers in general are not going to take it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And there are companies trying to jump in and fill that gap, Coinbase that you talked about, that have a Bitcoin debit card. You load it with Bitcoin, but as soon as they find out that you're engaged in sex work, they're going to feel the pressure of the government and they're going to shut you down.
Coinbase has already started doing it. Coinbase already, just about 2 weeks ago, I saw somebody tweeting that her Coinbase account had been shut down because they found out she was doing sex work. And when I applied for a Coinbase account actually a few years ago, I got it, and then I looked at the fine print and there was an anti-sex work clause there. So I've never used it because I'm like, screw you guys, you can do the same thing as PayPal. You're going to wait until I get a bunch of money. PayPal made its mark. It started on porn and eBay. That was how PayPal, developed into a major corporation. And then when eBay bought PayPal, they said, oh, now we're not sex work friendly anymore. So they had made their money, they had made their business literally on the backs of sex workers, and they turned around, and when they decided they didn't need us anymore, they not only cut us every sex work account they had. Nobody's ever made an estimate as to how much money PayPal made to you is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, potentially in the millions. Every sex worker account that they found seized it.
So many major new technologies, in order to spark adoption, they have to have some kind of incentive to switch. And it's amazing how often that incentive in the past has been sex.
Absolutely. Sex work built the internet, and that is not a brag, right? That's not an exaggerated statement. Sex workers built the frigging internet. An estimate that something like a quarter of all sites at one point were porn. A lot of these things were driven by sex work, and new technologies very commonly have that.
I'm experimenting right now with prepaid debit cards that you can load with cryptocurrencies that don't require your personal identity, don't require any accounts. And so I'll be doing a series on my blog shortly on how effective these things are. But it's still a two-step process, and it's still something they're not. No company in the U.S. will provide them, so I actually have to have them shipped to Canada and then forwarded to me here in the U.S. to use a prepaid Visa card. It's ridiculous. And how many people are going to go to that extra step to then protect their privacy or protect their identity? You mentioned the marijuana.
Thing, right? I was going to say, the thing about sex workers, right? In general, we're ordinary people. So sex work, if you want to have a statement as to, how savvy do sex workers tend to be with internet stuff, as savvy as ordinary people. In other words, some of us are very, and some of us are, and the rest of us fall somewhere between those two poles as to how much we know, just like anybody else, just like teachers, just like cab drivers, just like doctors, just like whatever. And so the widespread adoption of something like Bitcoin is going to need to be as easy as a credit card. Okay, you gave me Bitcoin. Now I can take my Bitcoin card and go to the grocery store and pay for my groceries in Bitcoin. And then even if there's still a few things like your landlord that need cash, you can still have enough cash customers to cover. Now, at my stage of the game, I can't think of anything that I want to buy except pot that I can get with Bitcoin, right? And what percentage of my income goes to pot? Not very much. I mean, it's just not something right now. If I took Bitcoin, I'd build up a big reserve of Bitcoin and wouldn't have anything to spend it on.
There are workarounds, but that's the problem. It's a workaround. Like you can buy anything on Amazon through purse.io, but you have to negotiate eBay style over price with somebody rather than just clicking a button and buying it.
Right.
And people have to be educated about all these workarounds, and who wants to spend their time doing that? There's future potential, but we're not there yet for sure. One more thing I want to talk about in security. So the marijuana business, a lot of them have been switching, not a lot, but some of them have been switching to cryptocurrencies because banks won't work with them. So they're forced to take cash payments, but they have nowhere to put the cash. Sex workers ever worry about that? I mean, especially if you're traveling, do you worry about large amounts of cash, or how do you handle those kinds of issues?
Of course. I mean, different girls handle it in different ways, right? I don't do a lot of touring, so I don't tend to end up with a lot of cash like that. But some girls' entire business model is based on touring, and they do end up with a lot of cash. And there's different ways. I mean, some of them just go ahead and carry it.
Then you have to deal with the TSA.
Right. Some of them deposit it in their banks, their regular bank account. They have one of the big chains, and they'll just deposit it in that. Bank of America or Chase or whatever. But once again, then they have to be careful and worrying about what if the bank notices a pattern, right? Because now we're starting to see, I just was covering this just a few weeks ago, that banks are now starting to use these algorithms trying to play spot the hooker. Others will buy prepaid visas, right? You take $1,000 or $500 or whatever, and you walk into a Walgreens and you buy the prepaid visa, and then you stack your prepaid visas and use those to buy your groceries. Or you buy a money order and mail it to yourself at home or whatever. I mean, there's ways of protecting yourself. But like you said a minute ago, they're all workarounds, right?
So it sounds like what we need is more development and more education.
Yes.
Maggie, I want to thank you so much for spending the time to come talk with me about this. Kind of an arcane topic, maybe not what you're usually asked about, but thank you.
We got it figured out eventually.
So where can people find you?
The easiest way to find me is just to Google, honestly. Google Maggie McNeill, and like the first several pages are all me. So that my website's there, my blog is there, my Twitter is there, YouTube interviews, all sorts of things like that. They'll all come up pretty much in that first page.
Fantastic. And if someone wants to buy your book, I'm assuming on your website, on Amazon?
You can go on Amazon and Google Maggie McNeill. My website has it. I've got a new book coming out actually in just probably another couple of weeks. I'm waiting for the proof even as we speak. I'm going to probably walk to the mailbox in a few minutes and see if my proof is there.
I will definitely keep an eye out for that. What's the title?
The new book is The Forms of Things Unknown. It is another short story collection.
Well, fantastic.
I kind of like short stories, so.
Thank you, Maggie. I appreciate it, and have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Do you ever feel the same? Well, maybe we could change. Turn the ship another way. Feel it in the darkness. Sailing right into those jagged cliffs. Yeah. Some say we've always been insane. Hey, life's a foolish game.